I am a husband, a father, and I am a student of all things business related, specifically marketing, innovation, and startup and small and medium sized business. Now, with the low code, no code option, you can do anything virtually, right? You can build a chatbot in 5 minutes. You can build certain AI interfaces in a few days without no technical experience. So now we're again going back to solving a consumer's pain point without having to be really technical in your expertise. And I think that has the potential to democratize retail and to level the playing field. I do salsa dancing with my wife. I play some music. I paint when I have an option to do so. And I love eating out different types of food. So those are things that people need to get to know me before
Oh,
they
nice.
see that side of me.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravee. Subscribe to my channel for conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Hi, Gautham. So nice to have you on my show.
Hi, Jasravee. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Very nice. First, we'll talk
Yeah.
about, I found this very interesting, your paper about women's development and advertising.
Sure.
This is, yeah. So, I mean, I would be interested in for multiple reasons, obviously. But, uh, there used to be so much work when we were talking about kids as a segment. So many practices got put. But women, it's okay. The stereotype is in question. Yeah. So unstereotype and, so extremes are being shown, etc., etc. But a lot of discussion about you're portraying the woman as just this, and this is not okay. And then there'd be a huge segment of people who would say, but there are a lot of women who are okay with being just this, and we are putting pressure on them to be super women, etc. So it's a very
Delicate.
challenging. Yeah, it's delicate sensitivities, sensibilities, regional culture, conditioning, so many things. So I'm very, very curious to hear from you in terms of, how this can be resolved, or how should this even be studied?
So just a little bit background, right? Like, as you rightly said, just so we were talking, what motivated the research was this idea that women are stereotyped in advertisements, right? However, and there are obviously, as a marketing professor, there are segments. I don't think anyone is okay with being stereotyped, right? And you
Hmm.
want to give them the true meaning
Hmm.
of who they are, and you want to allow people to flourish in their own skin and their own identity. What we were trying to really get at, in essence, was like, can marketing and advertising specifically play a role in improving the lifestyle of women by either communicating the products that are available to improve their lives, and or by reflecting how uh, you know, trying to empower women so that they are not stereotyped and allow them to grow. And it's not just women, right? To be clear. But at this
Actually.
point, that was the main issue that we in the paper studied. Was that okay? Does it happen? And fundamentally, we are looking to see what's the role of internet, right? Like at this
Hmm.
point of time, Facebook and others were getting a lot of pressure, but internet can also level set and can allow voices that are minority voices
Hmm.
to actually find a collective whole that can increase their uh, presence and be heard. And so we were just trying to see, well, does advertising actually drive, uh, is it correlated with women's development, and what role does the internet play? And we try to look at it in the modern, like there was a movement from advertisers to actually empower women, like show advertising that are empowering of women, and like does this actually change the narrative? That's what we were looking at across different countries. So fundamentally looking at, can advertising play a more responsible role in changing the societal norms? And what we find was that we find some correlation between advertising and women's development, and it's better in countries that have more internet. So internet has a role to play. in allowing these voices to find their uh, cohesive group, if you will.
Mhm.
And then what we found, we ran some experiments. We used the Dove ad that was aired
Mm.
across. Um, yeah, that was not an experiment; it's a qualitative study. But what we did before that was we ran an experiment to see how people actually reacted to portrayals of women in stereotypical ways.
Mm.
And the interesting thing was that people were upset about it and they were willing to talk about it on the internet, right?
Mm.
Not, and to your point, not everyone. There were lots of people who were still okay with the
Mm.
poll. About 15% were very upset and were willing to
Mm.
state that
Mm.
in an online forum. So, uh, and we saw this across when we looked at the Dove ad, which aired across multiple different countries. We saw this same thing: people really liking this empowering advertisements. And so what we were just saying is that, look, advertisers can play that role of trying. We're not pushing anything, right? We're trying to
Mm.
allow people to be comfortable in who they are,
Mm.
showing that there is that person that they can identify with in the advertisements that they see. And that allows for people to be self-expressive. Uh,
Mm.
and I think that's an important part that many an advertising agency is and companies are trying to figure out what's the right mix
Mm.
of these things. And I hope our paper was a step towards having a deeper conversation, right? It's just one layer of the onion has been peeled. There's
Mm.
so much more to go. And as you
Yeah,
said, it's
yeah.
a very, very complicated problem. We're looking at some follow-up studies. We're trying to look at different stereotypes and what happens and so forth.
Mm.
And so it is, and it varies based on culture, it varies based on country, it varies based on time, and it varies based on the product category that you're looking at. So,
Mm.
there's much to be done in this space. But again, in the domain of responsible marketing, responsible businesses, this is something that we see more and more companies and advertisers work on.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge because in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, when you're trying to, take shortcuts to convey a lot, like a symbol or a popular context from a popular culture, then, have a completely new conversation. So there have to be, I think, new conversations in popular culture that then advertising can borrow from, because otherwise, I mean, it's very tough. Yeah, I was talking to another person who's from the technology communication world, and he
Mhm.
was saying, he was responding to the fact that you know uh, they are criticized that you are manipulating all the data that you have. And he was saying, yeah, you guys manipulate people, their emotions, you cause
Yep,
such a lot of dissonance. We are not
yep,
causing dissonance, we are
yes,
doing confirmation bias.
yes.
Imagine. Look at the breadth and the spectrum of complaints that are
Well, and
possible.
that's the thing,
Yeah.
right? We all have a role to play in moving society forward, and where society wants to move forward, that's a debate in itself, right?
Mm.
But we need to actually play a role of actually putting ideas to the table so
Mm.
that we can have these conversations. I'll On this point, I give this analogy, right? Like oftentimes we have paintings, and you have a background there which says conversations at the edge, and you have these images that allows you to action. I have one with Mason's logo at the background. It's a conversation starting point. You see
Mm.
something and that allows you to have a conversation.
Mm.
That's all we're trying to say, right? Is that we
Yeah.
need to have, as an academic, I can preach philosophy, right? I can go philosophical. Like we need to have the conversations and debates and be respectful of
Mm.
different peoples and different opinions so
Mm.
that we can actually know, like, hey, where are we going? And let's build that consensus ground up. We might not have consensus, but at least let's get the conversation going. And these are all those little paintings or pictures that help you, advertisement, that
Mm.
helps you build these conversations as to what is acceptable, what's not,
Mm.
what is the role of marketing in the greater world, kind of a thing. And I'll stop at that point.
No, absolutely. Like when you said responsible marketing, I mean, just that says so much, that it's not just to sell. You have to be responsible about the impact you're having. So, Gautham, when you say, I was reading on your profile, CRT, Center for Retail Transformation. That's a very exciting area, must be. So, first of all, how did you get involved with something like this? Or if you started it, what triggered it? And then if you could tell us a little bit more about, areas where you actually end up supporting retailers.
So that's a loaded question and multi-pronged question. So let me start with the basic idea that retail is one of the largest contributors to the US and the global economy, right? And it's the largest private sector employer in the US, in India, and all of that stuff. And most of it is small and medium-sized retail, so 50 employees or less. They are the glue that holds the retail economy together in many ways, and are often underrepresented in conversations and undersupported in many cases. So the idea for the Center for Retail Transformation, quite simply, is to be that academic institution that drives transformation in retail, specifically focused on the small and medium-sized retailers and the startup community. So that's about, in the US, that's about 98% of all retail, according to NRF. And in India, it's probably the same, if not more, I would guess. Right. So that's the focus of what the center does. And by transformation, what we're trying to say is that retail itself is facing some headwinds. Right. So there's a lot of technology and a lot of data-driven decisions retailers, the big retailers, are trying to do. And they're trying to figure out how to make those decisions cohesively across the entire spectrum of their activities. And so, how do small retailers adopt these changes, these technologies, this customer-driven data insights? That's one of the main things that we try to help retailers with. Even before COVID, there's all this conversation about how the supply chains have to be changed, both with regards to operations and with regards to the role of sustainability and corporate social responsibility. And so that's another angle that we focus on, is that how do we help retailers reimagine these aspects? And the last thing is people, talent, right? Unfortunately, retail is not something that gets people excited to go to work. It requires people with talent in multiple different spaces, but we don't see that influx of talent coming in as easily as you would if you were an IT company, for instance. And so trying to change the narrative and trying to showcase to the future generations that, look, retail, there's a job for you irrespective of what you do. So broadly speaking, that's what we at the center try to do. We do it from an academic perspective. So hopefully I answered the question
Yeah. A, B, and
quickly and
C.
promptly.
A,
Yes.
B, and C all answered.
Well, that was the intent, is to be short and precise.
Yeah. See, we would have gotten into, more deeper questions, but I said that audiences must get the context for CRT first. Because, like you said, it is underrepresented. It's not part of conversations. I mean, although it's the last mile, it's the most important, today it's being recognized in the entire consumer journey, that can shift consumers where loyalty is decreasing. Yet, how do you support them, like literally support, and not just, for your own business gain? So, Gautham, could you share a case study or some examples so our audiences can appreciate the kind of impact this can have on a small business, small retailer?
So if you don't mind entertaining me, I'll give you a few examples.
Please.
Brief examples. So fundamentally, if you think about retailers, especially SMB retailers, the startup space, what they are struggling with is three things, right? One is they don't have the deep bench strength to actually do a lot of the things that the larger retailers do. So let me give you an example on that space as to what we do, is that we support these startup and small, medium-sized retail by leveraging what we as an academic institution are strong at, right? So we actually help them do research on issues that are pertinent to them. So we sign non-disclosure agreements, but so I'm not able to name names of companies, but we execute on surveys that help them understand what's the market demand for their product, what kind of challenges do their customers face, so that they can actually go about the business of developing the product and doing what's core to them, while actually giving credibility for themselves because the university is supporting their research, supporting them through research. A second thing that we do is that oftentimes I myself I often say the failed entrepreneur, and I've been corrected oftentimes to say there's no such thing as a failed entrepreneur. There's just an entrepreneur, right? As an entrepreneur, you often struggle with developing your go-to-market strategies and so
Mm.
forth. So we actually have students, where we will use the classes to actually build out go-to-market strategies for companies.
Mm.
And it's really helpful for these companies because they get the voice of the future generation directly into their marketing plan, and they get to see the world as they see it. And just
Mm.
not to toot the horns of my students, but their ideas are oftentimes very different from the way I think, or maybe you think,
Mm.
that the companies are like, oh wow, this is interesting, and they go about executing on that.
That's amazing, Gautam, isn't it? Especially in the COVID times, local started meaning trust. And there was this huge sentiment that, we will support our local, players. Cadbury's did an entire campaign, uh,
Yes,
which was like
and I
completely,
loved that campaign. That was one of the best, and it uses technology, by the way, right? It used
exactly.
AI to drive home
Yes.
that point.
Yeah, and they made possible, the sentiment was there, and they use data and technology to make it possible that okay, you can pick up this item from your local retailer, and you are making a huge
So
difference.
it's been good to see that consensus, but I'll be clear, right? Like ultimately at the end, consumers want to shop local and support the local, but at
Mm,
the same time that local retailer should be able to give them value.
mm,
And at this point, that's what we are trying to do, is that you fight on the fundamentals of retail. You
mm,
show them how to do these things, that they need to have the best products. They need to be able to build the brand loyalty that you just talked about.
mm,
Those are the critical things. And how do we get them there?
mm,
How are they able to compete with the bigger firms? That's what we're
mm.
trying to push from our end.
Right, right. And what do you think? So many times this whole, as you're talking, this is just coming to my mind. So I thought I'd, take your views on this. That the relationship with the local, retailer, which used to be so critical, then eventually it was, this huge trend of it doesn't matter. People want convenience. People want Amazon. People want online stuff, and then suddenly there is although this talk had started earlier that both can coexist, both have different needs they are fulfilling for a consumer, but suddenly that relationship, because it means trust, and trust became, the trust deficit was so high in the corona times. You were like, you wanted to stay away from everyone, that circle had really shrunk. You were reevaluating a lot of things. So is there an advantage that the local retailer guy, small retailer guy has? Uh, is he just catching up on everything that the big retailers are scoring big on, or are there any strengths that they have?
Yeah, look, they have lots of big strengths actually, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
just a strength. So first and foremost, they know the community far better. One of the big trends in retail is hyper local retail, right?
Exactly.
And these individuals, retailers, are at the forefront of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have in general, they have much stronger ties with their customers than does a large retailer. In general, I'm talking about, right? And they know them by name. They know, and I've during COVID times, I've seen how these small retailers have been able to leverage that
Mm.
to actually attract more of the local community to their fold. The last thing is agility, right? If you think about the
Mm.
larger retailer, they have to actually scale it across multiple different retail stores, retail
Mm.
formats, and so forth. A smaller retailer has much less scope of operations, so they're able to actually be far more agile and responsive to both the consumer demands as well as macroeconomic factors.
Mm.
So that allows them to actually build. Again, I'm a marketing professor, so if you don't have a customer and a loyal customer, you're lost. So, and it allows them to actually build that loyal customer base
Mm.
and strengthen the relationship. So, those are three right away quick factors that I would say
And huge,
small, huge factors,
huge
right? And you
factors.
saw that in the COVID times is that yeah, people went to the local retailer because of that connection. Yeah, we can talk
Mm.
about convenience. For clear, convenience is important. Let's be clear
Mm.
on that.
Mm.
But we are humans. We want to be part of something bigger. We
Mm.
also strive for connections with each
Mm.
other. And
Yeah.
how better to support it than the local community store, right?
Mm.
And so I do think that there are strong strengths, whether the retailers will take advantage of this and stay keep abreast of
That's
these
the question.
consumer
Yes.
sentiment. That's the
Yes.
thing, and that's what we're trying to say, right? Like, okay, you got this going now.
Mm.
You started innovating. I see so many different stories of the and talk to them about these efforts that they're doing. That's really awesome. But at some point we'll revert back to we'll go back to a world where there's no COVID, there's no war,
Yeah.
right? Where things will be normal.
Mm.
And what happens then? Are we going to get complacent
Mm.
and let go of the advantage or not?
Mm.
That's the bigger thing that I'm going to be watching for in the next few years.
Isn't that amazing, Gautam, that whatever technology is making possible, which is hyper personalization and agile marketing, are the things that are the strength of the local guy who's
Exactly.
struggling with technology.
Exactly.
What a
Yeah, and
paradox.
it's a and we come and full circle, right? We've come full circle, and look,
Mm.
everyone talks now about connection and the desire for each human to know, interact with another human.
Know
That's
them by
what
their
we,
name. Yeah,
right?
at the
And they
basic
don't
level.
have any database. They just know them, many
Mm.
of them, by what happens with repeated interactions. And
Yeah.
yeah, and retail is that one sector that is actually very, very rich in data, very, very rich
Mm.
in consumer journey experiences. And so it can be at the forefront of technology. If you think about autonomous stores, if you
Mm.
think about the metaverse and almost all the big retailers, Nike, Gucci, others playing in the space, you're seeing that, right? Like we're seeing the transition from retail potentially being a laggard when it comes to applying technology to now being at the forefront of
Mm.
experimentation, right? And I think a lot of the smaller retailers and the startups in the space are leading it. And I think if I remember my statistics correctly, and I could be very wrong on this, I think retail has about 97 unicorns at this point of time. I think that was SP Insights who gave that number. But I
Mm.
could be wrong on the number, but there are quite a few retail unicorns that kind of indicates where we're going.
Yeah, and behavioral data, like you said, I mean, that data is
Yeah,
that's the most reliable. I mean, when you whether you want to do segmentation, profiling, whatever you want to do, that data is the most,
personalization. Yeah.
yeah, a personalization.
In one
Okay.
of the it's
Hmm.
retail is the only sector where you have so much data, right? We have a
Yeah,
richness of data in some ways,
yeah,
and it's not the case with many other sectors, if you will.
yeah. And I have a question I'll come back to with what you started with later. Okay, I just
Okay.
hope I remember. Okay, so sustainable retailing. Yeah. So sustainability is a live issue now, Gautam, because after COVID, it's like our actions have led us to this. Now, what? I mean, at least let's vote with our wallet and have a preference for companies who are taking concrete measures to have a positive impact. So, the whole transparency in the processes is important. What are you going to do for the environment is important. So how does it translate for the retail sector? what are some actions? Now, again, A, B, C here. Actions, challenges, mechanisms that
Yeah,
retailers can utilize to enable this, because I know you're passionate about this subject and it's
yeah.
so nice to hear about this from an expert.
So a few things. One, sustainability, the drive for sustainability has been there even before COVID.
Mm,
Obviously, it is accelerated across COVID. There
mm,
is still what I call a behavior intention gap. People will say
yep.
that they want sustainable products, but they don't necessarily vote with their wallet. Across time, that gap has decreased,
Mm,
and it's probably the smallest at this point of time. And now we're seeing the financial markets, the regulators, all trying to make the sustainability, particularly when it comes to environment and the social aspects, perhaps critical. So I think we are at that crossroads. We've reached, I always say, we've passed that tipping point where sustainability is here to stay.
mm,
Retailers are going to engage. And what do retailers do? Look, I always say retailers are at that unique position, right? If you think about the value chain, they connect the upstream with the consumers. So
mm,
they have the dual opportunity to not only inform what their suppliers do,
mm,
but to educate the consumers. And so you ask, what should retailers do? So first and foremost, educate the consumers,
mm,
right? And on what is sustainable, what's not sustainable. Unlike other things like organic labeling and organic food, sustainability is a very nebulous construct that means something for everyone, and it's
mm,
very, very different, right?
mm,
So we need to level set, in my opinion, what it is,
mm,
and the retailers can actually educate the customers. Hey, this is what a product is doing that's good for the environment and what's not. We started seeing companies actually retailers going to the space, identifying here are the sustainable products, here's how they're sustainable. We need to do that more. We, as in the retailers, need to do that
mm,
increasingly. I think they also have a role in curating the products that they have in their assortment, right? So they
mm,
can actually bring in more sustainable products. And you see the bigger retailers doing that. Actually, not just the bigger retailers, the smaller retailers are using this momentum to actually differentiate from the bigger retailers, saying like, hey, look, we are fully sustainably sourced, right?
mm,
So you can curate the products to kind of showcase, hey, here are the sustainable things, which again reduces the effort on the part of the consumers. And in many
mm.
of these sustainable efforts, there is always the circular economy that we talk about, right?
Yep.
And how do we take back products? And think about this, even to this day, people don't actually recycle as much as you would like them to do, right? So retailers can actually incentivize people
Mm,
to recycle. At the same time, they can make the process of recycling far more effective as well, make it easier and convenient for the consumer. So I think those
mm,
would be the three things from a consumer facing perspective. Now, if I were to flip it to the supply chain angle, right, retailers can actually tell the suppliers what consumers are looking for. They can set the standards, right? And that's a
mm,
huge thing. You see the bigger retailers, at least in the US, trying to enforce that aspect. And I think that's one very, very important role that retailers can do is that they can convene people in the supply chain to try and do this. They can also identify the problems, right? So
mm,
sometimes it's sourcing, other times it's a take back problem, other times it's somewhere in the supply chain, things
mm,
getting lost or wasted, right? So retailers can identify the problems and can nudge suppliers to
mm,
work towards that. If you have governance structures in post, then they can inform the suppliers that, look, here is what it takes for you to be a supplier. So they can force the angle. Of course, the smaller retailers can't do
mm,
that as much as the larger retailers because they don't have the negotiating power.
mm,
But you can see retailers in general trying to do that. I think so. And the challenge, so those are the actions, if you will, like really quick, high level
mm,
actions. Monitoring would be one other action, right? The
mm,
retailers can monitor the actions across the supply chain to figure out these inefficiencies and fix it. Now, you said the
mhm.
second
For
aspect
less
was challenge.
wastage. Mm,
Yeah,
okay. Hmm.
And not just like we can think about it just not just from a product perspective, but also from a people and a societal, right? Who
Hmm.
are the people who are actually working in these stores and
Hmm.
or manufacturing plants? You can set standards for that, and you're
Hmm.
seeing retailers trying to do that as well. So both from a people perspective as well as the product perspective, we can see retailers trying to take charge. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Yusuf.
Yeah. Gautam, as I'm listening to you, we were just doing some project for a B2B company a few days back. And, I was asking them for innovation, what is they said we do a lot of research. So I was asking them, what is your mechanism? And they said, we have a household panel and we have experienced retailers who guide us, in terms of
Yeah.
what's working, what's selling better. So it was very telling when you said that they can educate the consumer on and actually incentivize um, for sustainable practices, because like behavioral science says, if you can make it easy, the change can happen. The easy is the most important part, if and like you said, nudge. And now, Gautam, could you share some retail trends to watch out for in 2022 and
So
some
I can.
game changing ones? Okay.
Oh my gosh, game
so
changing.
so from a reluctant expert.
Yes. Well, look. So I'm a fan of technology, right?
Okay.
I was going to say that the trends that I really I'm going to follow are simple things. Retailers are now innovating like crazy. How are they going to continue to do so? Are they going to remain agile, right? Like think about buy online, pick up in stores. That before COVID was supposed to take like 6 months, 8 months to execute. They were able to, retailers here were able to execute on that within 3 weeks, right? Are we going to remain agile? But you asked me for bigger trends, more forward looking. So I'm a fan of the metaverse, for better or for worse. We can have an entire session on that, but
Yeah.
I do think that there is an opportunity for retail to blend the physical with the digital. Uh, when in my own, like I do some surveys just to understand consumer sentiments, there is a group of people who are perfectly okay with a digital only experience,
Mm.
right? So if that group increases, especially the younger generations, how do we actually build that ecosystem? I think that's a game changer in many ways. The second, from my perspective, is sticking with the technology theme, would be this. Historically, technology has been not accessible to the smaller retailers and the smaller people who don't have that technical expertise. Now, with the low code, no code option, you can do anything virtually, right? You can build a chatbot in 5 minutes. You can build certain AI interfaces in a few days without no technical experience. So now we're again going back to solving a consumer's pain point without having to be really technical in your expertise. And I think that has the potential. Now with the low code, no code option, you can do anything virtually, right? You can build a chatbot in 5 minutes. You can build certain AI interfaces in a few days without no technical experience. So now we're again going back to solving a consumer's pain point without having to be really technical in your expertise. And I think that has the potential to democratize retail and to level the playing field for most retailers. So those are the two
Hmm.
trends that I would be watching, perhaps in reverse order. The low code, no code first, and metaverse is still a few years away, but I do think that that will come to fruition. And I would be interested, right? Like, emerging countries might this might be an opportunity for many of them to leapfrog
Hmm.
more of developed countries to and come up with innovations that are very, very specific. Because for metaverse to actually succeed, you need really high-end technology, computing power,
Hmm.
infrastructure, and emerging countries don't have that. So they might come up with much better creative solutions
Hmm.
to bridge that divide than would be a developed country like the US or Europe. And that's the space that I'll be watching, especially that group of countries to see what do they do? How do they actually build this
Hmm.
new world that we might be entering into?
And one question that I thought I'd ask you towards the end is something you talked about. Young people don't want to come to retail for jobs. They don't want to join. So, uh, what would be your message to them? And it's just out of curiosity, because what is your message to people who are not excited about jobs in the retail sector?
So first of all, the reason they're not excited is because we as members of the retail ecosystem don't educate them well enough on what are the opportunities in retail. I will give a specific example in my class when I taught the first time retail management. There were 6 students who worked in retail who said they would not work in retail in the beginning of the class. We brought in a lot of experts to talk about careers, how do you progress up retail, and so forth. And at the end of the semester, all of them said that they are interested in careers in retail. Right. So let's be clear that it's only because of information asymmetry. People have these perceptions, like you just said,
Hmm.
which are very one-sided, if you don't mind me saying that,
No,
and
not
does
at
not
all.
give
Hmm.
you that does not give you the full scope of what a retail sector does, right? So
Hmm.
I always say this to the students is that what's your passion? Tell me your passion, and I'll find you a job in retail about that and a career progression up that to the C-suite level, right?
So are you ready for this now?
Uh-oh. Yes, I am. My heart is in my mouth as I say, get ready for it.
That was very satisfying to hear. Okay. Right. I start now. Mother's best advice.
Keep trying.
Alternate profession could have been.
Well, gosh. Yeah, I'm obviously struggling. So, alternate profession could have been sports.
Okay. What would you do on Mars for fun? Planet Mars.
Oh, I read books.
Hmm. Okay. As per your wife, your most often used phrase is.
Keep trying, actually. Sadly, no.
Okay. Okay. One thing no one knows about you.
I am a man of different tastes and interests. I do salsa dancing with my wife. I play some music. I paint when I have an option to do so. And I love eating out different types of food. So those are things that people need to get to know me before
Oh,
they
nice.
see that side of me.
Beautiful. Okay. A book you'd like to gift to all your friends.
I'll stick with retail. I will say Retail Pride would be a book that I would like to share to with people who are in retail.
Okay. Okay. What's something new happening in your life right now?
So something new that's happening in my life right now is that I used to be into powerlifting, and COVID has stopped me from doing that. I have finally got myself back on the train of lifting and getting back in shape, and so that's the new challenge that I'm dealing
Oh,
with.
many layers here. Okay.
Yes, indeed. As I
What would
said.
you, yeah, yeah, like you said, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Stay curious. I've been blessed. Like my mom, when she said keep trying, that's what she meant was that try different things so that you actually understand what is it that you're passionate about. And in the process, I discovered that I'm passionate about, like I'm interested in a lot of things. And that's one thing that I tell my daughter, I tell my students is just stay curious. Like that's the only thing we need. Okay, done.
How smart of me. I first heard it all and then
And
because
then
I was curious as well. Okay. What is your favorite childhood memory?
Oh, the favorite childhood memory for me is playing cricket in the streets with my brother and friends. I
Where?
used to be the big bully for my brother at that point.
Where?
In
Which?
Kerala. In Kerala.
Oh, okay, okay. If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
Wow. I would actually support. That's a really poignant question. So I would I am a big fan of children and trying to alleviate problems that children face. So I would support that, be it with regards to foster kids, be it with regards to their education, be it with regards to anything related to supporting children and giving them a better future. That would be my thrust.
Wow. Okay. What is your greatest joy?
Oh, hanging out with my family is the greatest joy.
Okay.
I can answer that in my sleep.
Superb. How would you like strangers to remember you?
That I'm an honest and transparent person, that I care for people, and that maybe I have a little bit of humor in me somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
The lesson that took me the longest time to learn was to not that the most important trait um, is to not give up.
Right, right. What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
Missed opportunity that I would like to have a second chance at. I, I, so I would love to have a chance at a singing career or an acting career,
Ah,
right?
ah.
But so jokes apart, always I'm happy where I am, and I wouldn't do anything different. But singing or acting would have been neither of which
Nice.
I'm good at.
So, Gautam, we are towards wrap up. I'd
Okay.
request you to share your online address, email,
Yeah.
wherever students and professionals can reach you, or anybody if they have a
Yeah.
query.
Yes. So my LinkedIn would be my easiest way to connect with me. And if you search for me, Gautham Vadakkepatt, on LinkedIn, you should be able to find me out there. If my email address is gvadakke@gmu.edu, that is going to be the email address that you could reach me at. And I would love to connect with any like-minded people or anyone who's interested either in retail or responsible marketing or anything that we talked about, and to share some viewpoints.
Awesome.
But I've enjoyed this conversation, right? It's been really oftentimes when you do research and or work on certain things like the Center for Retail Transformation, you don't get an opportunity to present it to an audience. So you're doing a very important part, which is
Mm.
said, which is education and trying to educate people on the challenges and the opportunities in these spaces. So thank you for doing that. And I've enjoyed watching some of your previous webcasts and podcasts. So that's been really fun. I would strongly encourage people to follow you as you continue this important role that you're doing of being the bridge that connects people and shares their perspectives, give them a platform to share their perspectives. So
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much. It was great hosting you.